Spanish colonialism in Africa lasted about 500 years. Despite this length of time, Spain had a limited colonial presence in Africa compared to South America, and its influence was primarily concentrated in North Africa, particularly in the territories of present-day Morocco, Western Sahara, and the Spanish territories of Ceuta and Melilla. The Spanish colonized majorly two African countries, Morocco and Equatorial Guinea. However, the latter is the only Hispanophone country in mainland Africa. That is, where Spanish is the official language. In fact, 87.7% of Equatorial Guineans have a good command of the Spanish language. The Spanish presence in Africa dates back to the 15th century, during the age of exploration and colonization. Ceuta was captured by the Portuguese in 1415 and was later transferred to Spanish control in 1580 as part of the Iberian Union. Melilla was also occupied by Spain in the 15th century. These territories remained under Spanish control, and they are still considered Spanish territories today. As the 19th century progressed, Spain's interest expanded to encompass new territories, including the Western Sahara and the Gulf of Guinea. The loss of American colonies in 1898 fueled a heightened Spanish interest in Africa, ultimately leading to the establishment of its colonial presence in the early 20th century. This era marked the colonization of North Morocco, Western Sahara, and segments of present-day Equatorial Guinea. Despite its ambitions, Spain's colonial reach fell short compared to the likes of France and Britain, extending only to the coast of Morocco and Mauritania and the routes to the São Tomé. In the 20th century, Spain had a colonial presence in the northern part of Morocco with the establishment of the Spanish Protectorate in 1912. This lasted until April 7, 1956, when Morocco gained its independence. Spain colonized two major countries in Africa, Morocco and Equatorial Guinea, but the following were the different territories colonized independently at one point or another. The Reef area along the Mediterranean from Melilla to Tangier, and the Cape Juby area near the Spanish Sahara and Algeria. Ifni, a southern Moroccan colony under Spanish rule since 1476, reclaimed by Morocco in the 20th century after the Ifni War. The Spanish Sahara, initially known as Rio de Oro and situated northwest of French West Africa, adjacent to the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands, the sole remaining Spanish colony in Africa, consisting of 8 islands and 5 islets, originally inhabited by the Guanches, that was conquered in 1496. Ceuta, a Spanish city on the Tingitana Peninsula along the African side of the Strait of Gibraltar, founded by the Phoenicians in the 8th century BC and incorporated into the Spanish crown in 1580. Equatorial Guinea, often overlooked as a Spanish-speaking nation, gained independence from Spain in 1968, marking the end of Spanish colonial rule. Despite its small size in West Africa, Spanish remains the official language. Throughout much of its modern history, Spain held sway over Equatorial Guinea, exerting significant influence in its politics, economy, and culture. Spanish exploitation of the territory's natural resources, particularly its forests, thrived. The establishment of a colonial police force, the Guardia Colonial aimed to protect Spanish colonists. By the 1960s, Spanish Guinea boasted the highest exports per capita on the African continent, making it the fifth largest cocoa producer in Africa. This unexpected economic prowess made its mark. The roots of the Spanish colony in the Guinea region trace back to the Treaty of El Prado in 1778 between the Spanish and Portuguese empires. From 1778 to 1810, Spain administered Equatorial Guinea through its colonial viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, based in present-day Buenos Aires, Argentina. A brief interlude saw the United Kingdom establishing a base on Bioko from 1827 to 1843 to combat the Atlantic slave trade led by Spain and illegal traders. Following an agreement in 1843, Britain shifted its base to Sierra Leone, and in 1844, with the restoration of Spanish rule, the region became known as the Territorios Españoles del Golfo del Guinea. In the late 19th century, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and Fernandino planters transformed the island of Fernando Po with vast cacao plantations. The indigenous Bubi population, devastated by disease and forced labor, gave way to an economy relying on imported contract workers. In 1914, a labor treaty with Liberia led to the sea transport of 15,000 workers, revealing later exploitative conditions. The International Labour Organization's 1930 investigation exposed near-slave practices, promoting a ban on recruiting Liberian workers for Spanish Guinea. Persistent labor shortages fueled an illicit trade in smuggling Igbo and Ibibio workers from Nigeria. By 1942, the clandestine workforce on Fernando Po reached 20,000. A 1942 treaty with the British Crown increased the influx of Nigerian workers, reaching nearly 100,000 by Spanish Guinea's 1968 independence. From 1926 to 1959, the Crown united Bioko and Rio Muni as a colony of Spanish Guinea. The economy thrived on cacao, coffee, and logging, relying heavily on immigrant labor from Liberia, Nigeria, and Cameroon. Military campaigns in the 1920s subdued the indigenous Fang people, ensuring stability by 1929. Rio Muni's small population in the 1930s found escape routes to Cameroon or Gabon. Growing demand for labor and coffee cultivation offered alternatives. Meanwhile, labor shortages persisted on Fernando Po, prompting planters to recruit Igbo laborers, turning the island into one of Africa's most productive agricultural areas post-World War II. In the aftermath of World War II, Spanish Guinea underwent three distinct phases in its political evolution. Initially labeled a province from 1946 to 1959, it had been elevated from its previous status as a colony amidst Portuguese takeover concerns. Attempting partial decolonization from 1960 to 1968, Spain's efforts failed in the face of persistent anti-colonial activities by the Guineas. Eventually, on October 12, 1968, Spain granted the colony self-governance, marking its complete independence from Francisco Macias Nguema as its elected president. The enduring legacy of Spanish colonization in Equatorial Guinea is the widespread use of the Spanish language. However, the newfound independence came at a cost. Losing privileged access to Spanish markets led to the collapse of Equatorial Guinea's export economy in the late 1960s. In 1912, a pact between France and Spain officially turned Spain's influence in Morocco into a protectorate. This arrangement included a northern strip along the Mediterranean, the Strait of Gibraltar, and a southern area near Cape Juby bordering the Spanish Sahara. Tangier, however, maintained a special status outside the protectorate. Despite losing its colonial power, Spain, driven by strategic concerns and a desire for prestige, actively engaged in expanding its influence in northern Morocco. With fears of encirclement by France, Spain saw Morocco as vital for its strategic security. The belief in colonial possessions enhancing national prestige fueled Spanish interest in adopting a proactive approach in Morocco. The 1900 Convention recognized separate influence zones in Morocco, and in 1904, the Entente Cordiale acknowledged Spain's right to a zone in the region. In the Rif, iron mines became a cash flow lifeline, sparking prosperity in Melilla. Following the 1906 Treaty of Algeciras, which placed northern Morocco under Spanish rule, the Spaniards seized the opportunity to develop the mineral-rich region with the construction of narrow-gauge railways. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Morocco and Spain navigated conflicts such as the African War from 1859 to 1860 and the Rif Wars from 1893 to 1894 and 1911 to 1926. The United Nations played a role in decolonizing Spanish territories. On April 7, 1956, the northern part integrated into independent Morocco after France's protectorate had ended. Spain later ceded its southern zone through the Treaty of Angra de Sintra on April 1, 1958, following the brief Ifni War. Here are 10 facts about Spanish colonialism in Africa. One, Spain's colonial history in Africa dates back to the 15th century when it gained control of Ceuta and Melilla, two small territories on the northern coast of Africa. These territories remain under Spanish control to this day. 2. Spain established a colonial presence in Western Sahara in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was later incorporated as a Spanish colony until Spain withdrew in 1976, leading to territorial disputes and conflicts. 3. Spain and Morocco engaged in conflict over the control of Tetuan, leading to the Treaty of Wad Ras in 1860, which defined Spanish influence in northern Morocco. 4. Along with France, Spain established a protectorate in northern Morocco in 1912. This arrangement lasted until Morocco gained independence in 1956. 5. Spain's colonial activities in Africa were often motivated by economic interest, including the exploitation of natural resources and trade routes. 6. Spanish colonialism left a cultural impact in the areas it influenced, with the Spanish language, architecture, and religion, Catholicism, playing significant roles. 7. The colonial presence in areas like Western Sahara led to tensions and conflicts with indigenous populations and neighboring countries, contributing to regional instability. 8. Spain withdrew from Western Sahara in 1976, leading to territorial disputes between Morocco and the Polisario Front, a Sahrawi nationalist movement. 9. The decolonization process in Africa led to the independence of territories previously under Spanish control, including Morocco and Western Sahara. 10. In the 1960s, Spanish Guinea, now Equatorial Guinea, stood out as a significant economic force in Africa, ranking 5th in cocoa production and having the highest exports per capita. Equatorial Guinea is also the only African country where Spanish is the official language. The imprint of Spanish colonialism in Africa has left enduring marks across various realms, shaping the cultural, political, and socio-economic landscape of regions where Spain once held influence. While the Spanish presence in Africa was not as extensive as that of some other European powers, the repercussions of this historical period persist. Culturally, Spanish colonialism introduced elements such as language, with Spanish and Catholicism playing pivotal roles and continuing to exert influence in areas historically connected to Spain. The drawing of borders during the colonial era has led to ongoing territorial disputes, notably exemplified in the case of Western Sahara, contributing to contemporary geopolitical challenges. Economically, the exploitation of natural resources and the establishment of trade routes have left a lasting impact, with some regions experiencing development while others grapple with the legacies of resource depletion and economic exploitation. Social and ethnic dynamics have been shaped by the colonial period, as hierarchical structures and divisions established during the time still influence certain societies today. Infrastructure and architecture, remnants of Spanish colonialism, serve as tangible reminders of the historical presence. The Spanish language, introduced during colonial times, persists and has influenced local languages. Educational systems established by the colonial powers have also left a mark on the region's approach to education. Political institutions in post-colonial nations were influenced by administrative and political structures established during the colonial period. The struggle for independence and the subsequent formation of nations were deeply shaped by the colonial legacy, impacting the development of national identities that reflects a complex interplay of colonial and indigenous influences. Despite the cultural hybridity resulting from interactions between Spanish colonizers and local populations, ongoing challenges persist in regions marked by the legacy of Spanish colonialism. Territorial disputes, ethnic tensions, and economic disparities continue to pose political and social challenges, necessitating a nuanced understanding of history to navigate contemporary issues and promote reconciliation and development.